So could you please tell me a brief introduction about the wine and how it passed on to your family, and before, who was it?
So, well, the story starts 1100 years ago in a valley in the northern part of Italy, in Trentino, a very savage valley where the church sent monks to civilize this area. And they built a church and they entitled it to Saint Leonard, which was a very famous saint around that time. This little church grew up into a monastery, and around the 1600s my family started managing this monastery for the church, and then they fell in love with this place and they finally decided to buy it, and so this is how the property arrived in our family.
And when did you start working instead in the vineyards?
Let's say that I started working with my father in 2001.
How come? Why did you end up in the wine business?
What I knew, I loved nature, animals, and I had just returned from South Africa where I was traveling alone. I traveled there for 3 or 4 months, working both in cellars, and then I worked into a lion breeding project, which was a great passion of mine, animals, and I knew I wanted to work in the nature, and the best thing you can do in nature is wine.
So how did you find working with your father? Did you find it stimulating, or did you have a lot of conflicts, or how did it go?
At the beginning it wasn't easy because the real top wines of the estate have been created by my father, so it was his creature, and it wasn't easy, I think, also for him having somebody coming in, and also I was very little experienced at the time, so 22, 23 years, I had no idea really of what the wine world was. It took time to find the right path, and I think that today we are very lucky, firstly because there are very few fathers and sons that get really well along and that can continue the tradition. I'm very fond of my father and I admire him very much for what he did, also because it was much more difficult in those days to create something of a high level than it is today. Top world wines in Italy were not produced in the 70s and the 80s, and so today you can create anything out of a box. You go on the internet, you read the best practices, and you can create a business reading the experiences of other people on the web mostly. At that time he was very alone, and so he created out of his mind with his ideas, and there were very little models to which to refer to. We are a very good team. He's very traditional, I am more avant-garde, if you want, and I look to things in a very evolving way. He wants to keep very tied to the tradition, and in the middle we meet, and the best ideas have always been created after large fights. That's for sure, because fighting is part of I would say a creation,
to accomplish your goals in a way.
Yes, absolutely, because you must be really sure of them, and so they go through quite a difficult moment that helps the evolution of ideas.
How is your life in the vineyards, and how much time do you spend working there?
So, well, I spend most of my time in San Leonardo, even though as we sell in many countries abroad, I travel quite a bit. I wake up quite early in the morning, 7 to 8, it depends, it's not fixed. I do my 5 Tibetan rituals every single morning, which is my gym. Then I go to the office to see what's around, and then there is always a nice walk around the estate to see the agricultural part with the director. We go to see the vines, how the works are developing. With the director, who is a great man, he's the right arm of my father since 40 harvests, so he was born in San Leonardo. Is really the memory of all the works we do there. He's really a great
He's a reference point as well.
Absolutely, and he's been really important also in the relationship between me and my father. He's been a pillar. You always need somebody to help you out, and maybe you have some ideas you want to tell them to your father. You need somebody to put them in words for your father, because not always your words are the ones he's going to accept. We have tourists which come around, especially in the summer.
Because you do wine tasting classes.
We do wine tasting classes as well, and very small groups. It's a very small activity of ours, but we do it. We do a bit of everything. It's a small estate. We go from the production of wine to the bottling, but also all the communication, the marketing. It's
and
all
that's
done.
why you travel a lot as well.
Exactly. We sell from New Zealand up to Taiwan, and then we go all across to Canada and down to Brazil. So we do cover most of the world which is open to wine.
And where is the place where you sell most your wine?
Today I think the largest for us is Germany and Switzerland, and the US has a third position. But then there are many emerging markets where you need the presence of the producer.
Okay.
So we have like China is very interesting and great fun to travel over there, I must say.
And do you travel with your father, or do you travel?
Not so much. Maybe in the most important things where we have very important journalists, and then we travel together. But mostly the emerging markets, I do them alone. It's quite adventurous sometimes, and very, I would say, hardcore in the sense that you have to really, every day it's a city, every day it's a plane, every day it's waking up at 5, moving on to the next city. So it's really intense and quite tiring, I must say.
So how do you think the wine industry is competitive? How do you see it?
It is an extremely competitive industry because it's full of wine producers. When you walk into a supermarket, you find a wall of wines which is about 2,000 SKUs. You must imagine that behind those there are 2,000 companies producing other wines that are not even represented in that supermarket. It's a very capital intensive business, and it takes long time. You plant a vine, it takes you 3 years before the vines arrive to a production moment, and then if you want to do a super wine,
you have to wait.
A very important wine like San Leonardo, you must wait maybe another 6 years before the wine goes on to be released on the commerce. And normally you make it out of vines which are at least 10 to 25 years old. It's a very slow business, but it's a very fascinating business because a wine producer, that if you're a small one or a big one, must have a knowledge about everything. You must go from the vines to selling the wine. If I had to say to a young man or woman how to approach, there is a very interesting side in marketing communication in wine, which is a business which communication is very heavily involved today with social networks. Especially we have an incredible potential, so companies really make their own marketing all inside, and communication is approachable. Salespeople are very requested into wine world. I think that after you have sold wine, you can sell anything because it's very complex.
When did you start appreciating wine?
I started really appreciating wine, I think at around 22, 23, when I started working with my father and going to all these tastings and tasting various wines and understanding what I was looking. But I'm still in an evolution. So.
But it's really hard to understand wine in a way.
Because you are changing, you know.
Yeah.
And you are approaching things that you discover new things, and there is a component which is taste and a component which is interest. The wines people were drinking in the 1800s are very different from the wines that we are drinking today, because technique has refined itself, and so the wines are much better today than what they were. Or much better, I don't know, but
more refined, you would say.
More refined and more adapt to the taste of people today.
So what would you associate to your wine, as in motorcycles and music?
You know, San Leonardo is a very true wine, but it is quite sophisticated, and I would say also old school. So, for example, I love Lou Reed because he has these texts, so that the words are really strong, you know, and they're very real. It's real life, and the music is very delicate and very beautiful always around, or it is very hard rock. But I think that jazz, you know, is a kind of music that you can really enjoy
while drinking wine.
It's more difficult to associate a wine to a motorbike, but as it is an old school, you know, and as it is Italian, I would go for a Moto Guzzi, like a Falcone, which I actually own one. There are motorbikes that have a soul. You have to turn them. To turn them on, it's complicated, you know. And the San Leonardo, you must open it and leave it a while to breathe. You know, it's not a wine that it's not Coca-Cola. You just and you drink it. So I like rituals, you know. When you open a bottle, you have to decant it for me, and you have to leave it there. You have to serve it at the right temperature. The same is with motorbikes. With an old motorbike, you can't just. There is no key. You have to go there, and maybe
it's a slow process.
Yeah,
to enjoy it.
You must
Otherwise
talk to her,
can't.
you know. Sometimes, come on, this time, be kind, because sometimes they just they don't answer you, and if you want them to answer, you just have to approach them with the right way. So
it's a bit of a reflection of wine itself. I mean, it's a slow process.
Well, if I have to. Like a wine like San Leonardo, I would tie to a motorbike of those years, and it has all its process.
Slow process to eventually enjoy it perfectly.
More, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.